Michigan got their second loss of the season, getting upset on the road by the Huskies. 27-17 was the final in Washington. And the main reason why Michigan lost that game is because their offense was completely broken. The only thing they could do was run the football. If Michigan isn't allowed to spam the run game for the entirety of a game, they get in trouble because they don't have the ability to play complementary football. What made the past 3 years of Michigan football one of the most dominant stretches in program history for the Wolverines was that they had the ability to run a balanced offense. They could kill you running the football, but they also could kill you in the pass game as well. And you had a really good quarterback in J.J. McCarthy who let Jim Harbaugh tell it he's the best Michigan quarterback ever from a talent standpoint when it came to his ability to make big plays with the game on the line. You don't have that this year with the three quarterbacks that you've thrown out there. Tuttle, he's not that good. Alex Orji's only a good athlete. He's more of an athlete than he is a quarterback. And then Davis Warren just doesn't know how to minimize bad decisions. So when you got bad quarterback play, you got a bad offense because you can only go so far in today's age of college football if you don't have a quarterback that you can trust. Eventually, you're going to be put in situations like you were against Washington where the run game isn't working. You got to be able to generate some plays in the passing game, and Michigan can't do it. Now, I thought that Michigan was just so dominant up front that they could just run over anybody they played until they went up against Ohio State. But what I kind of overlooked is that sometimes you're just going to have teams that are just better than others at stopping the run. And when you have a team that goes all out on stopping the run and you can't pose a threat throwing it, you don't give the defense anything to be worried about because they already know what you're going to do before you do it. It's a difference between being able to run the football when the team knows you want to run, and it's a difference between wanting to run the football, the team knows you want to do it, and they're able to stop it. Now, Michigan still was able to get some big runs, like Donovan Edwards had a big explosive touchdown during that loss. But the thing is that you can't win games in college football every single week by just spamming 55 runs every single week. That's not a strategy that results in winning football. You got to be balanced. You got to be able to make the defense somewhat fear that you're going to throw it so they don't know what's coming. And when you play Michigan, you already know what they're going to do. They're just going to spam the run every single game, and there's nothing else that you really have to game plan for because your quarterback position is in disarray, and you also lack any dynamic playmakers in the passing game at receiver. Your only reliable receiver is Colson Loveland, and he's a tight end. And the problem that also has hurt Michigan's offense isn't just that they don't have good quarterback play, but for the very longest, even when Jim Harbaugh was the head coach, they've never really been that great at developing good receivers. Look at how well Nico Collins is playing for the Houston Texans. He never played this good when he was at Houston. Well, when he was at Michigan. You know, it's one of the biggest mysteries ever. Like, when Nico Collins was playing for Michigan, he was one of those players that you see as kind of wasted potential because he had all this hype coming out of high school and he got to Michigan and he never really quite played up to his level of potential. But he gets to the NFL and all of a sudden he's living up to that potential. Why is that? It has to be the coaching and the player development. When you think of Michigan, you think of a program that develops monsters up front. Great offensive linemen, great defensive linemen, great running backs. You don't think of a team, a program that has a rich history of developing great receivers. And it's not just a Michigan problem, but it's also a Big Ten problem. Outside of Ohio State and Oregon, there aren't too many teams in this conference that have dynamic wide receivers, that have a dynamic passing attack. You feel me? So for Michigan moving forward, Sharon Moore, what he has to change with this program is their inability to develop dynamic playmakers on the perimeter. That is the biggest thing that Michigan is lacking. You got everything. You got great trench play. You got really good DBs, but offensively, you don't have the good quarterbacks and you don't have the necessary talent around them to throw the football to that could elevate a guy like a Davis Warren or an Alex Orji. That year that Georgia won the championship with Stetson Bennett, Kirby Smart's first ever title, they had an all-star team around Stetson Bennett. Good receivers, a great offensive line, great running backs. They just weren't a one-trick pony where they would just spam the run a million times a game. And year two, when they went back-to-back with Stetson, they were able to replicate that formula because of how good Brock Bowers was. They had Lad McConkey. Georgia has shown the ability to develop great playmakers at receiver. Michigan hasn't been able to do that. And they also haven't really been able to develop a high-end quarterback. J.J. McCarthy is the most talented quarterback that Michigan has probably ever had. I remember a lot of years watching Michigan football under Jim Harbaugh before they had their recent string of success when they had Shea Patterson at quarterback. You know, a guy like Shea Patterson was okay, but he was never going to be able to take your offense to the next level. Michigan is one of those programs that they can develop a lot of possessions well outside of receivers and quarterbacks, and that's why their offenses are normally dependent on how successfully they can establish the run game. And when they can't do that, you force them to become one-dimensional throwing the football. You expose their biggest weakness, their inability to recruit and develop high-end talent on the outside. And that's the biggest problem with Michigan football that Sharon Moore has to correct. I don't believe that Sharon Moore was a terrible hire by Michigan. I believe that, you know, they made the right decision. You weren't going to have a lot of time to do an extended coaching search anyway, just with how late you were into the off season. You already had National Signing Day. You want to have a coach that recruits are already familiar with, so you don't get a bunch of decommitments and a bunch of, you know, transfers. And with Sharon Moore, you were still able to sustain that culture that was built under Jim Harbaugh. But he is going to have to take this program for what it was under Jim Harbaugh and find a way to make it better. And the way to do that is by getting better at finding better wide receivers, being able to properly develop them, and getting better quarterback play. If you got to go spend $2-3 million to get a good quarterback, it's not a bad investment, because although football is a team sport, the most impactful position when it comes to winning and losing games is the QB position. And if you had a really good quarterback this year, like if you were able to get your hands on the Cam Ward, you probably would be undefeated right now. But that's why Michigan's offense is broken, because they don't develop high-end wide receivers. They can't consistently develop high-level quarterbacks neither. They just are a quarterback that has this old-school mentality that we're going to develop really good offensive and defensive linemen. We're going to have a stout defense. We're going to be tough up front. We're going to spam the run game until you prove you can't stop it. But then when there is a team that they go up against that can stop the run game, that can match their physicality, they get in trouble. Remember when they got blown out by Georgia and the semifinals a few years ago? They couldn't run the football because Georgia matched Michigan's physicality. And what was Michigan's counterpunch? They didn't have one. Michigan's offense is broken because they don't have a counterpunch. They're just a school that's overly dependent on their right hook. And when they can't knock you out with that right hook and you force them to have another game plan, they can't win. Because they don't know any way else but knocking you out with just that right hook. They keep using it until it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, they have nothing else in their bag that they can use to find the way to win. And that's why Michigan's offense is struggling right now. They're a one-trick pony. And until they can diversify this offense, they're going to continue to struggle. And Sharon Moore right now, he's currently dealing with an identity crisis. And this isn't the first time that Michigan has gone through this. What a lot of people forget about the Jim Harbaugh era, I know the last 4 years of Michigan football made people forget about some of the struggles that Jim Harbaugh had for the majority of his tenure down in Ann Arbor, but he made a lot of changes offensively. He went from a pro-style offense to a spread offense, back to a pro-style offense, because he was trying to figure out what works. Michigan has to do a better job at fixing their issues with their inability to play complementary football stemming from their quarterback problems and how bad they are at developing wide receivers to reach their potential.